Namaskar, good afternoon. I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation to Forum for Hindu Awakening for inviting me here today. As you may not be able to tell by my dress, but more obviously by my looks and by my speech, I was born and raised in the US. I am as American as apple pie. I was raised with pizza, with football, with all of the American trappings, things that we're accustomed to hearing about children growing up and learning in the typical American childhood. What I was not raised with was any particular Hindu upbringing, any Indian cultural upbringing. I grew up in a town that was, at the time anyway, quite homogenous. There really wasn't much variety or diversity in the community. However, I never really felt different or out of place. One thing that my parents did instill in me was the idea and the principle that I am a global citizen and how to make myself a better person, not only for myself, but for my community at large. Now, although I didn't necessarily feel different growing up in the United States, that's not to say periodically I wouldn't be singled out and asked questions about Hinduism or Indian culture even. Just to kind of give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the stuff I kind of exposed or encountered growing up. I remember one instance when I was, I don't know, maybe 8, I was on a school bus, and having not been raised with any particular ideas about Hinduism, or even God for that matter, I remember some kids on the bus asking me, "Do you believe in God?" and they were laughing. Now, having not been, clearly no ideas of God in particular were instilled or drilled into my head, I had no idea why they were laughing at me, and as a result, I didn't feel insulted. So this was kind of a little bit of a snapshot of what I encountered growing up. Another thing that a lot of people in my situation have encountered is the question, well, what's the red dot for? Now, again, having not been exposed to it, I couldn't really answer. That's not to say I wasn't exposed to or heard other people's versions, some of which made no sense, and some of which were truly outlandish. I remember one in particular that talked about how the red dot was actually blood, and it was what mothers or wives or sisters took from their own palm and put on their husbands, sons, or brothers to protect them at war. As a child, that was a little bit frightening, honestly. So this is the sorts of thing that I was exposed to growing up. Now, as I got older, I then moved to more metropolitan parts of the country, and in so doing, I was exposed to temples and Hindu culture, such as Bharatanatyam and other such things. That's not to say I really understood a lot, but I nonetheless had greater exposure, and the idea of deities and stuff started to kind of come to the forefront and make more sense to me. Of course, whenever I'd be broached or asked for the question about whether or not, what are all the arms for? Why does Ganapati have an elephant head? And so on. Either I would give them whatever stories I had heard, a shrug, or I don't know. And that was, again, kind of an example of the sorts of exposure and understanding I had growing up. Now, I'm not sure if this is normal or typical for children who grew up in the US from a Hindu background, but if it is, it might explain why there's so many misconceptions out there about Hinduism, and not only amongst the global community, but even amongst Hindus themselves. When I was in high school, I took, actually my first proper education on Hinduism took place in a high school classroom, where I read the Mahabharata, also known as the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, or the Bhagavad Gita. And those really piqued my interest. I thought they were extraordinary. There was something inherently beautiful about them that really took root and didn't blossom until some years later, which led to my subsequent study and understanding, well, however minimal my understanding at this point may be, but it nonetheless triggered something in me to study and explore Hinduism, which I'm hoping to share at least some of that here today with you. So I do, before I move ahead, would like to thank the Spiritual Science Research Foundation for allowing me use of their slides. Much of their research has definitely helped make sense of a lot of the things I've been exposed to and learned over the years regarding Hinduism. So one of the most fundamental and basic principles is the idea of sattva, raja, and tama. Now, as a kid, I would periodically hear these words thrown about. I had some vague idea of what something that was sattvic was, but I didn't actually know what it meant. So this is a simple explanation. It's far more complex. Being Hinduism is so deep and vast that I really can't even get into it, but to kind of give us an idea, something that has a lot of sattva in it, or that's sattvic, has a lot of purity and knowledge, or is very positive, where something that's very rajasic, or high in the raja component, has a lot of action and passion, and something that is high in the tama component, or that's tamasic, has a lot of ignorance, inertia, a lot of negativity associated with it. And this is applied to all of creation. Just as we have protons, neutrons, electrons, and the like, so also we have sattva and raja and tama, which is beyond the scope of modern science to find and parse out. So this applies to food, clothing, colors that we wear, or in our environment, the music we listen to, the movies we watch, and so on. Everything can be broadly categorized based on the proportions of sattva, raja, and tama in it. So, like for example, the colors that we wear, they can be more or less sattvic. They can help us have more spiritual purity in ourselves and around us, or less. Similarly, people can be broadly categorized as sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. So for example, somebody who's tamasic is not just highly negative, but actually works very often to the detriment of society, whether intentional or not. Then you have people who are rajasic. Now, when I think of highly rajasic individuals, I typically think of little kids that run around screaming a lot and you just can't seem to contain them. So that's the image that's evoked for me. And then you have very sattvic people who are altruistic in nature, who put society ahead of themselves, and so on. So, as you can see, any one of these parameters, be it food, clothing, music, these are all things that can be applied to our own lives to increase the sattvicta within ourselves or decrease it, and so on. So, taking another very stereotypical question I have been broached with is the vegetarian versus non-vegetarian debate. Many of the people who I have been raised with who are Hindu are vegetarian. Now, many of them also don't know why they're vegetarian, they were just raised that way. I, however, am vegetarian by choice. I started off eating hot dogs and hamburgers like most of my ilk, but have since adopted a vegetarian lifestyle. But now that begs the question, why do Hindus, by and large, why is vegetarianism part of the lifestyle, or why is it so strongly encouraged? So we'll take, for example, here a banana and a piece of meat. Nothing untoward or fascinating or interesting, just two pictures here, nothing terribly exciting. Now, taking into consideration sattva, raja, and tama, what is subtly going on? What is the actual composition of what we're eating when we break it down? So this is what someone who consumes meat is ingesting at a subtle level. Even though I may be vegetarian now, even as a meat eater, I can say I probably would not have wanted to eat that. But that could just be me. By contrast, this is what happens when we eat a banana, or this is what a banana is made of. So it not only purifies ourselves, but to some degree, the environment as well. So we can see based on what we're eating, how that can also influence who we are as people. What is our makeup? What are we putting in our bodies, and in turn, the environment? So now this is as far as lifestyles are concerned. But what about the rituals? That's another thing that I've encountered a lot. Lots of questions about rituals. Well, why do you do this? Why do you do that? So one ritual that's used quite often, like for example, we have Ganesh Chaturthi coming up. A lot of people will be doing pujas and artis and things like that. And even if we don't do that, a lot of people do apply different rituals to their lives. Why do we do the things we do when we do them as Hindus? So the simple act of lighting a lamp, which we do during many occasions, daily, weekly, monthly, on special occasions. This is what happens when we light a ghee lamp. Lighting a ghee lamp has the capacity to purify our environment. It attracts, or it emits divine consciousness into the environment. It emits frequencies of bliss. It has the capacity to attract subtle divine particles, so energy of the various deities of God, in essence, from locations as far away as heaven, or Swargalok. So just the act of lighting a ghee lamp can do that. When you add other acts into that, it purifies the environment and the individual that much more so. Now, at the beginning of the Dharma Sabha, we lit a lamp, but it wasn't ghee, it was oil. Why would we do that? If ghee can do so much for us, why would we light an oil lamp instead of a ghee lamp? An oil lamp has the Raja frequencies in it, but it also has Sattva frequencies. Now, why would we want something that has Raja frequencies for an auspicious occasion? Because the energy of action, as the Kampir mentioned earlier, the energy of action is necessary for the event to go forward. So we need both the Raja and the Sattva in order for this Dharma Jagrati Sabha to go ahead. So this is why just this snapshot has definitely helped me understand what I do and how Hinduism can help me. And I've really started to gain an appreciation for the depth and breadth of what Hinduism is and what it means, what Hindu spirituality encompasses, and what I could take as an individual to not only be a good Hindu, but with these points going forward, continue in the veins set by my parents, namely being a good person and in turn helping society at large. So with that said, again I would like to thank you and namaskar.